Support for WMFE comes from JustCallMo.com and attorney Mo DeWitt. As a Central Florida native, Mo DeWitt is committed to offering legal guidance in personal injury cases such as car accidents and slip and falls. Offices in Orlando. More at JustCallMo.com.
Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Engage explores Central Florida's issues and culture with new voices, new perspectives, and thought-provoking interviews. Engage is made possible with the support of members like you and inaugural sponsor, JustCallMo.com. Engage is hosted by Sharon Stone.
You are listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, a Central Florida woman born in Haiti joins Engage. She will share her fears about her family's safety as violent attacks by gangs have just paralyzed the capital there. First, though, nurses with HCA Healthcare's Osceola Hospital and Lake Monroe Hospital in Sanford rallied on Tuesday as representatives from the National Nurses United Union negotiated with the healthcare giant for a new contract. Nurses are fighting for better staffing levels in HCA hospitals, saying they're stretched thin and there's a lack of medical supplies, both causing staff burnout and a compromise in patient care. Heather Cox-Faith is an HCA nurse at the Lake Monroe facility. She originally worked in the automotive industry, but she switched to the career in nursing a few years back.
My mom was a nurse. I grew up around nurses. I worked as a CNA early in my career and just wanted to get back into that. They laugh at me. They call me the Mimi Whisperer because, I love old people. It's just my thing. So, they come into the ER. That's I just kind of gravitate to them. I'm a naturally, caring person.
Heather is an emergency room nurse at HCA Lake Monroe.
Sometimes I'm the first face they see when they're coming through the door because I'll work triage, which is where you go in, you sign in, you state what your complaint is. And then after that, we assign you a level of care depending upon how emergent you are. So I may be the first person you see as you come through the door. Or I may be the last person you see as I discharge you from the ER.
HCA Hospital Corporation of America is a for-profit healthcare system based in Nashville with 186 hospitals in the U.S. and U.K. with a market cap north of $86 billion. HCA blames the nursing shortage on a shortage of licensed nurses in Florida. Heather Cox-Faith joined Engage to explain why she says HCA's position is inaccurate.
Just here in Florida, 180,000 people are holding an active nursing license. And most of them are not working. They would return to the bedside if maybe things were better. During COVID, we all kind of went through a lot of just moral injury and moral distress from being away from our families or working where in a department that used to be 4-to-1, which now they're giving them 7-to-1. 7 patients is hard for anyone to care for. And we hear every day that our staffing's adequate. Well, adequate's not what you should strive for. That's like saying, well, being average is okay. Right now, there aren't enough nurses, and ER is having to hold ICU patients. ER is supposed to be street and treat or get them upstairs. In our ER, there's times we're holding 8 to 10 ICU patients, and then we have 4 nurses. We had an incident where, we got 2 back-to-back traumas with only 4 nurses on the department. All 4 of those nurses had to go into the trauma bay to take care of critical patients, which left every one of our patients out on the floor without a nurse. And then they had to go steal from another unit because they say that's adequate staffing.
It has to be impacting patient care.
You've had patients sitting on the floor with no nurses caring for them because there were no nurses, because we had what HCA calls adequate staffing. So if that's your mom, do you think it's adequate that your adequate staffing was all in a trauma, taking care of life-threatening emergencies, and your family member sitting on the floor, if they turn on their call light, that there's a unit secretary who's not clinical to come on the unit and try to help you? this is what we're dealing with. This is what they're calling adequate staffing. I mean, at the end of the day, we all come to work with like the good faith that we're going to do the greatest job today and we're going to care for people and we're going to love them. And then you get to work and we have our adequate staffing. And we're trying to do the best we can do and still make sure everyone's taken care of and safe.
Given the staffing conditions, what is a typical day like for you? Do you take a break? Are you nonstop the minute you walk in till the minute you leave?
Some nights, oh yeah, some nights we barely get a chance to sit down, or we come off shift and you're like, oh, I haven't even been to the restroom tonight. There are some nights that we come in and we're sick, but we're just mustering through, and we go into trauma and we've been in trauma for 3 hours with this critical patient. And then we come out and realize that no one's been able to get our meds passed. So we're running to get that done.
Do you have any friends or colleagues within the nursing community or licensed nurses that have chosen to leave because of the conditions?
Absolutely. I've got friends selling real estate that left nursing.
Did they lose their passion for nursing, or was there another reason?
I won't say they lost their passion, but it's hard to go to work every day and see what's going on and know you're doing the best you can.
So Heather, we're going to reach out to HCA Healthcare. I'm curious, what would you say to them?
To be honest, I'd like to know how we made billions of dollars during the pandemic, and now all we hear is, you need to decrease staff, you're over budget. And it's not patients are coming in less, it's you're over budget. Because they count the number of people walking through that door every day as a part of our budget. They don't count the patients we're holding because there isn't staff in other departments. So if we made billions of dollars and now we're over budget and we're working sometimes 2 nurses shorter than what we were working even several years ago.
Have you thought about a career change again?
I've thought about different aspects of nursing and at times. To be honest, I'm still at my job. It's not so much that I just absolutely love the company that I work for. I love the patients I take care of, and I love the people I work with. I work in an area that has a lower socioeconomic status. They may not see their primary care doctor ever, or if they even have one, they have an option to come into the ER, go into the free clinic and waiting all day. I'm an ER nurse. I shouldn't know what your children's names are or what you have going on in your life. You think an emergency room is just coming in, having your emergency taken care of, and then going home. I mean, right now we're seeing some of the same patients on a weekly basis because they don't have access to health care outside of the ER. So, we get to know and love some of our patients. That's why I'm still where I'm at. We have nurses that were at that hospital for years that left. We love our new grads as they're coming in, but a new grad's not the same as a nurse that's been there for 25 years. You need to keep your old nurses to train your new nurses. We have new nurses coming out of nursing school, thrown to the wolves, and then less than a year into it, they're in tears. They're like, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe I should have been an accountant. That's not fair. I mean, it should be where we want to teach them and turn them into that 25-year employee. Any other company I've ever worked for, they want their employees to stay. The problem we're dealing with, they're like, oh well, we'll just hire new ones. But you're letting staff that's been there 25 years that love their coworkers and love their patients and love the community they work in leave when you're making $5.2 billion in profits. This is an issue.
Heather Cox-Faith is an emergency room nurse with HCA Lake Monroe. We did reach out to the HCA with a request to join us. They declined and issued the following written statement. Activity like this sometimes occurs when a union and an employer are engaged in negotiations for a contract, as we are with NNU. Today's activity is no different than similar actions NNU has taken against health systems across the country. Our staffing is safe and appropriate, and we are proud of the quality care we provide, which has been recognized by independent third-party patient safety ratings organizations like Healthgrades. We value our nurses and are hopeful that we can quickly reach an agreement on a new contract that is fair and reasonable for both sides. Ahead here on Engage, we will hear predictions for sargassum blooms this summer and some ideas about what to do with that smelly stuff that could actually benefit coastal communities. And later, a trip down memory lane to your local video store. I'm Sharon Stone. You are listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. You're listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. I'm Sharon Stone. Remember, we want to hear from you. You can send us an email to engage@wmfe.org, or you can send us a talkback on our free app. Ahead on this program, we'll look at efforts to collect blood for patients suffering with sickle cell disease.
It comes down to a lack of awareness about just how important it is for sickle cell patients to receive blood transfusions.
Susan Forbes with OneBlood joins us. First, though, to say Haiti is in a state of emergency just doesn't capture the chaos happening in the capital of Port-au-Prince. Armed gangs are attacking and overrunning the nation in a violent battle for power. Prisons there are being set on fire. That is allowing thousands of criminals to just roam free. Natasha Wiley lives in Orlando now, but she was born in Haiti and lived there for 12 years as a child. She still has family and friends in the Caribbean country. She joined Engage and talked to us, and she started by sharing what she remembers growing up in Haiti as a child compared to what she's seeing now.
I remember life being very easy. As a child, you're not responsible for anything. You're just responsible to go to school, go to church, and then come home. You're responsible to care for your siblings and, to show love and share with, whatever you have in the neighborhood. I remember having electricity 24/7. I remember having ice water, having hot chocolate in the morning and coffee. I remember meeting with friends, talking about what are we doing Sunday afternoon, which was always the rendezvous at the what do we call it? The park. We call it La Place. So those things don't happen anymore in Haiti. Those things you don't hear children talk about, what happened in school this morning or yesterday. You don't hear children talk about what are we singing in church Sunday morning? Who's doing the prayer? Things like that don't happen anymore in Haiti. You don't hear kids talk about that anymore. They are living in fear, in anxiety, hiding, or have no place to stay. This morning, I received a call and I was speaking with a friend, and he mentioned how there are people still sleeping, outside under tents because they leave their home because the gangs took over the area
Your
where
friend
they're
is in
supposed to
Haiti?
stay, where they live. Yes. He says how the gangs are now, what's the English word? Operating, directing, or governing, that's the proper word, governing the country, the gangs. So one of the gangs apparently asked for all the other gang members or all the other gang leaders to kidnap the hostages, to release them for free with no money, without asking money to release them. And they have done that, is what I've heard. It's just chaos. How are the people of Haiti supposed to live with gang leaders governing a country? How? Never heard of. Unheard of.
In addition to your friend, you have family, uncles, cousins there.
Yes, yes.
How do you feel about that? Are you scared for their lives?
Oh, yes. Every time you get a phone call or a text, even scared to answer or reply back. Let's just say you read the text or you get a voice from WhatsApp. You're scared to listen to it because you don't know what you're gonna hear, what they're about to tell you. If it's someone from where they live that's been affected or gunned down or set on fire, because they're not just killing other gang members or um, delinquents. They're killing innocent people. They're killing innocent people. Setting markets, setting banks, hospital. One gang leader, I took some notes down. Hospital, General Hospital, Bandit threatened to take over the hospital. They threatened the directors at the hospital, the doctors, for them to take over, for them to stay in the hospital and control what's going on in the hospital. Banks are set on fires. You're talking about places. I didn't grow up in Port-au-Prince, but I frequently visit. Last time I went was 2021, June 2021. A place called Canaan, Onaville, Croix-des-Bouquets, Peigné. Those are places that people are they leaving their homes and they are staying on the street because they cannot stand the gunshots, the fires that are put in. So they sleeping on the street, or if they own a car, they are sleeping in the car with their family members.
What needs to happen?
They need to appoint a leader who is for the people, a leader who has conviction enough to lead Haiti, a leader who understands the Haitian people. They talk about revolution. Revolution is not about breaking and setting stuff on fire. When you destroy banks, you destroy hospitals, you destroy supermarkets, you burn everything down, then what's going to have left? That's not what a revolution is about. And that's what they are asking. How is this revolution happening when you're setting everything on fire? The people are not manifesting anymore. They're not on the street rallying anymore. It's the gangs that are rallying, making their demands.
Natasha Wiley lives in Orlando and is the executive director of the Haitian American Art Network. That's a nonprofit, and their mission is to elevate diverse communities and the Haitian American culture in Central Florida through social services and through art. If you miss any part of the show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and just listen when it's convenient for you. The program will also be available on demand later today at WMFE.org. Sargassum predictions are out for the 2024 summer season. You may have seen that mass of smelly seaweed that appears on Florida shores each summer. Exactly, though, what is sargassum?
Sargassum is a macroalgae. So essentially, if you were to hold it in your hand, it would feel like kind of you grabbed a bunch of blades of grass, and then there are some they look and feel about like peas, and those are the floats that keep it afloat in the water. So this thing lives its entire life in the water and right at the surface of the water. Those little things keep it afloat. And it generates these large mats in the surface of the ocean.
The sargassum masses develop way out in the Atlantic Ocean. Over the past several decades, climate change has warmed ocean water to a point that facilitates overgrowth of these sargassum mats. They find their way onto the shores of Caribbean communities as well as both the east and west coasts of Florida. Once ashore, the sargassum begins to rot, and that creates problems for the coastal communities that it's contaminating. As the size of the mats out at sea increase, so do the mounds of rotting biomass as it makes landfall. Brian Barnes is an assistant research professor at USF's College of Marine Science. He's using satellite data to track sargassum blooms in the Atlantic. He joined Engage to talk about this season's predictions, and he started the discussion by describing the problem sargassum poses onshore.
Since about 2011, we started seeing sargassum in huge aggregations that were not in an area that would typically have such huge aggregations. And, while this is all well and good in the open ocean, it's floating at the surface, that's fine. Once it comes inshore, then you start to have a problem because it can, for instance, you have seagrasses or corals or things that are at the bottom inshore, and those can be light limited because now all the light's being blocked, essentially shaded by the sargassum. Or even worse, the sargassum washes up onto a beach, it starts to decompose. Any of those creatures living in and among the sargassum will probably perish because they can't get out of the sargassum to get back into the water. It decomposes, it causes a lot of water quality issues because all of that, it's like a tea almost. It starts filtering back into the water because it's just decomposing algae matter. It also creates just a stench. It smells like rotten eggs. So not pleasant for a lot of the areas that are impacted are coastal tourism-based, Caribbean countries and so forth. So they really don't like having, tourists don't like having their beaches piled 3 and 4 feet high or much higher with this decomposing algae ecosystem.
Are there also, in addition to what it may do to the animal life in the sea, is there a health impact to people as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a neurotoxin or something that you would often have with a red tide, but it can cause respiratory distress. Especially people with asthma. It's not a healthy thing to be breathing in. And then there are other complications with handling it. As it's out in the ocean, it can accumulate heavy metals like arsenic. And so when someone is tasked with cleaning this up and removing it, it's challenging to deal with. As it's leaching out, it may be leaching out arsenic. You don't want to have a ton of exposure to that.
So Brian, why these record-setting blooms?
It's really difficult to know. So as I mentioned, the first one that we observed in this area was in 2011, and it was, at the time, unheard of. And the blooms have essentially gotten bigger and bigger and bigger every year since then. I mean, some years it's a little bit higher. There's some variation in that, but the trend is going very much upward. But it's difficult to know exactly why. The initial bloom, we think, in 2011 may have come just a certain amount of just the right conditions where the wind pushed from its more natural location to this equatorial region. And then once it got there, it established, and there are, just like with any plant, a macroalgae will grow when the conditions are right. So if you have the right light environment, if you have the seed population, and if you have nutrients or fertilizers, then it'll grow. And then also temperature. So it essentially, the area that it's living now, it meets all of those characteristics for it to just explode in growth. You have a lot of nutrients coming in from like the Congo River, the Amazon River, the Orinoco River. All of these rivers are dumping in more or less fertilizer that just sustains and builds on the existing population that now lives there.
Is it possible to link this to climate change?
Yes, but it's not as direct as you might think. As I said, the temperature, actually higher temperatures aren't necessarily good for this thing. So the heat that we saw in 2023 may have contributed to why we didn't see a massive bloom in 2023, at least not as big as it was in 2022. It may be, almost everything lives in a Goldilocks zone. It likes it warm, but not too warm. And you have to have the conditions just right for it to show these huge blooms.
Brian, I remember talking last year about this huge bloom that you could see from space, that it was invading and people were keeping their eye on it. Is this the same one, or are we talking about something else?
Pretty much all our lab does, all research group does, and there are plenty of others that do this as well. There are Earth-observing satellites. They're flying over and looking down and capturing what the conditions are.
Yes.
And we are able to turn that into information about a bloom. Okay, but we can see a bloom or an individual patch that would be, pretty small by standard parlance or whatever. Like we could see something that was on the order of an acre. Okay, the problem with this bloom is that it's acre-sized or huge aggregations that are spanning the entirety of the Central Atlantic. So just because you can see something from space doesn't mean that it's like some huge thing. We can see very small things from space. But these aggregations that we're seeing now are just notable because they are so so many things that we can see from space, all a part of one larger, what we call a bloom, or the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt.
So as these blooms are growing, could it threaten more of the coastline? Is that a concern?
So sargassum, it's living at the surface, and so it largely moves with the surface currents.
Okay.
So it will, of course, grow when the time is right. So we go into a bloom phase, or the growth phase is happening now, and then around June or so we'll see the peak, and then it'll start to wane, just like a normal cycle, a seasonal cycle for a plant or anything like that. But as it's living at the surface, it will move with the surface currents. And those have on a broad scale, those have a generally well-defined pattern. Just like we know the winds, the atmospheric winds have a general pattern that they go, the ocean currents have a similar type. Large-scale patterns are pretty consistent throughout time. So we know that it will, in general, these patches will be in the central Atlantic. They will migrate westward into the Caribbean. So like through the Lesser Antilles, and then they'll track along inside the Caribbean Sea, just south of the Greater Antilles. So that's Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Cuba, and so forth. It enters into the Gulf of Mexico and does a turnaround there, and then it leaves the Gulf of Mexico between Florida and Cuba. So that large-scale pattern is pretty consistent.
That was Brian Barnes, Assistant Research Professor at USF's College of Marine Science. Many firms around the world are looking for practical applications for sargassum waste that coastal municipalities rake up off their beaches. A Carbon Wave in Boston has turned a sargassum extract into a natural ingredient in cosmetics, as well as a natural leather alternative. Other firms are finding agricultural applications, including crop protection and animal feed. Shorelock is a Miami-based company with a focus on mitigating coastal erosion. Dr. Troy Scott is one of the company's founders. He joined us to explain how Shorelock uses sargassum to fight erosion.
The way that I describe how Shorelock works is if you're going to make a sandcastle, and if you're going to need sand and water. If you have too much water, the sandcastle collapses. If you have too little water, the sandcastle collapses. So what Shorelock does is it optimizes the amount of water that's mixed with the sand, and so the sand has a cohesiveness there. Alginates naturally do that. They naturally contain chemically, they bind water very, very well. And so it was a natural choice to go this direction. And the fact that we have so much sargassum that we need to repurpose, it was a no-brainer for us.
What do you then do with it after you get a hold of it?
We contract with a company that collects the seaweed. And then, of course, they have a process that removes any heavy metals or any toxins that are present in it. And we get the finalized extract. We mix it in with our other products that make Shorelock, and then we put it back into the sand. And it's in a powder form. We mix it with water, put it into the sand, and it dissipates throughout the swash zone in the wet area of the sand, not the dry area, but the wet area of the beach. And then it works in a dual purpose. It actually keeps the sand more cohesive, but it also has a dewatering purpose to keep the sand settled and not in suspension.
What is then the long-term vision for you with the waste sargassum?
The long-term vision is we're finding something to do with it. And there are a lot of other options. Fertilizer is one. And even, Shorelock could be, a dune fertilizer as well. But what the idea is taking something that is really an environmental hazard when it does wash up, because it is, it does decompose. You have noxious gases, hydrogen sulfides, not to mention, stinging creatures and heavy metals. And so to take something that is really a waste product and turn it into something useful, that's the vision. And I think that's what's so novel and so great about so many different companies coming together and finding ways to repurpose this seaweed.
Is there some kind of maybe ripple effect long-term with the environmental benefits when you get rid of this harmful, would you consider it a toxin at that point once it's on the shore?
The seaweed itself wouldn't be a toxin, okay. But it does contain like heavy metals, and it could have numerous things in it, depending on the environment that it came from. The ripple effect is, right now, there just isn't anything to do with it. And there's so much of it. The increase in just biomass is so significant that we're getting in at a time when it could become overwhelming. So the fact that we have so many different groups, scientific, environmental, And municipalities and governments, local governments are getting on board with this very, very quickly. And so what we're going to see, I mean, people use sargassum for everything from building homes, making blocks out of it, to fertilizer, to anti-erosion. So that it's so diverse, and it's fascinating that something as simple as a floating algae could be repurposed in so many different ways.
Can you talk to our audience about why it is so important to you to create this type of binding agent that could ultimately reduce erosion?
So it's a novel idea to have a binding agent that reduces erosion, and also, like any idea that's different, it's not widely accepted as mantra, because erosion is the result of a lot of different things. So it's interesting. It's something that we have done, and we see the empirical effects. We have a lot more research to do with it. Everything up to now, including sea turtle nesting sites. Can we create habitat for sea turtles? Can we reduce erosion and loss of nests for them? So there's so many different aspects of it. To me, when we first came up with it, it was a fascinating idea that I had no idea would work. And I really didn't have much faith that it would, but I wanted to give it a shot. And then when it did work empirically, we kind of went backwards and said, okay, now how can we make this useful across multiple disciplines and in different environments, different areas? And we're at the point now where we can be involved in this sargassum issue. And so that's just another aspect that's interesting to me. And mitigation of coastal erosion, of course, just the loss of property is major, but the loss of habitat is secondary, of course, to that as well. So yes, as a company, our focus is on erosion mitigation, but it has always been on an eco-friendly and environmental approach to everything. And so when I developed the product with alginates in mind, was I forward-thinking enough to think that I was going to repurpose sargassum? No. But the fact that the opportunity arose and it just fit right in with our vision, that's really the opportunity now.
Troy Scott is a co-founder of Shorelock. Coming up, a need for blood donors to save sickle cell disease patients. And the 90s called Engage, so we revisit a popular video hotspot. You're listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. You're listening to Engage in 90.7 WMFE. I'm Sharon Stone. Florida lawmakers moved forward with legislation that funds sickle cell treatment and research. That happened just yesterday. After the House passed it last week, we talked to an Orlando doctor who is literally suffering from this disease. She explained the destructive effects on her life. If you did not hear it, I would strongly encourage you to listen to her words. You can find them by heading to WMFE.org and listening to the Engage podcast. So the legislation on the governor's desk, it sets aside $10 million a year. For people coping with the disease right now, they rely on blood donors as a lifeline to relief. Every day, OneBlood screens their supply looking for matches to help sickle cell patients. Help lies with blood donors in the African American community, but there are not enough of them. Susan Forbes with OneBlood explains why these specific donations are needed.
What's unique about these patients is that because they need so many blood transfusions throughout the duration of their life, it's not only do they need the right blood type, it's important that they receive blood from the same ethnicity. And this is a disease that primarily impacts African Americans and people of African ancestry. And the issue comes into play with less than 5% of African Americans are donating blood. And so when you need to match up a sickle cell patient with someone from the same ethnicity, it becomes challenging to find those matches when not enough African Americans are donating blood. And the reason that they need to have the same ethnicity donating for them is because when you need repeat blood transfusions, anybody who needs repeat blood transfusions throughout their life has the potential of building up antibodies because they receive so many blood transfusions. And they would be able to create less antibodies by receiving blood from the same ethnicity. So that is the reason that we look for, these matches for sickle cell patients, not only being the right blood type, but also being from a donor of the same ethnicity. It's much more likely you're going to find the perfect match by searching the same ethnicity.
So looking at the numbers, we're talking about 1 in 100 African Americans actually giving blood. Any thoughts on the challenges there and maybe why that number is so low?
I think it comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to a lack of awareness about just how important it is for sickle cell patients to receive blood transfusions, how it's helping keep them alive, helping keep them pain-free. It's saving their lives. Every day, there's sickle cell patients in our local hospitals receiving blood transfusions. And it's somebody who donated, just a couple days prior, and that blood is there to help save their life. Without it, these outcomes for these patients would be very different. And it's important that people who, of all ethnicities, but for the African American community, to hear the message that you hold the power to help these sickle cell patients by simply being a blood donor. And, there's generational issues of where sometimes there's myths that have been passed down over the years where people have misconceptions about blood donation and where their blood goes and what happens with their blood. But, we have all this information at OneBlood.org to show you that those are just that. They are myths, and that the facts are clear, that blood donation is safe, that you are literally helping give people a second chance to live. And for the sickle cell patients, they are dependent upon blood donors, and they are very much dependent upon blood donors of the same ethnicity. So, we do everything we can to create awareness about this, to show the community just how needed they are in helping these patients. And in addition to being able to help these sickle cell patients, African Americans are more likely to have type O blood, and that is the blood type that's in the highest demand by hospitals. So not only are you able to help sickle cell patients, but you're able to help all types of patients of all ethnicities because you have the most in-demand blood type. So, these are the things that the community, I hope, will hear and will be inspired to take action, because, this is sickle cell disease is a very it's just a painful disease, and blood donation is something that is helping them. But when they receive these blood transfusions, it's something that's helping them alleviate that pain. Not only when they're in a sickle cell crisis, many times they're rushed to the emergency room and they end up needing, emergency blood transfusions. But there's new procedures out there now called blood exchanges, and it's exactly what it sounds like, where you're literally exchanging the blood in the sickle cell patient's body, and that it's there's a way that they do this where it's removing the sickle shaped blood and replacing it with new donor blood, and they cycle through probably about 6 to 8 units of blood to do a blood exchange. And this isn't something that's one and done. It's something that they have to do, monthly or bi-monthly, and these things go on a regular basis. So imagine every month needing to go in and get a blood exchange, and you're depending on 6 to 8 donors who are the perfect match for you, not only of the same blood type, but of the same ethnicity, helping save your life. This is a call to action to the community to donate blood. And to put this in the spotlight so that people understand just how important it is to be a blood donor, that you're literally helping save these patients' lives.
And Susan, are these patients our neighbors? They are in the Central Florida community that you're helping?
Yes. The sickle cell patients are all around us. They're in Central Florida. They're around the world. Sickle cell disease impacts so many people, and it primarily impacts the African American community, but there are other ethnicities too who also have this disease, but it primarily impacts the African American community. And here at OneBlood, what we do with every first time African American donor is going to be screened to see if their blood donation will match a sickle cell patient first. And if it does, then it's going to move in that direction so that we have those units on hand to help these patients, because they're very specific donations that are needed. If they don't match a sickle cell patient, then their donation will go on to help any patient, that matches their blood type. So it's behind the scenes at OneBlood. We have a reference lab, and there are people here literally working 24/7, 365 days a year behind the scenes at OneBlood in our reference labs, screening the blood supply, looking for the perfect match to help these sickle cell patients. It's work that goes on that most people are completely unaware of, but it's what happens in our blood center here at OneBlood. We have several different reference labs, and one is here in Central Florida, and one is in Miami, and there's one in Jacksonville and in North Carolina. We have them in St. Petersburg. We have them throughout our service area. And there are medical technologists back there around the clock screening the blood supply, looking for these matches for sickle cell patients. It's the number one thing they're doing back there, is looking for these donations for these sickle cell patients. So it shows you just how critical it is, that this is, a team effort to save these patients' lives on a regular basis. And it starts with the donor. They are the number one player here to make sure that that blood is here and available to help these sickle cell patients.
Susan Forbes is the Senior Vice President of Communications for OneBlood. Pop quiz hotshot. It's a Friday night in 1992. Your friends and you have no plans, a $20 bill, and mom's station wagon. What do you do?
Pick up a movie from Blockbuster and make it a blockbuster night.
That's right, Blockbuster. The brick-and-mortar video giant that killed mom-and-pop video stores peaked in 2004 with more than 9,000 stores worldwide, with earnings approaching $6 billion. Its blue and yellow signage became a beacon to families and teens desperate for cheap, convenient home entertainment. Long before Netflix and chill, it was make it a Blockbuster night. And then something happened.
And I remember my Xbox, that's how it started with Netflix. You had to go on your Xbox, take a movie, put it in your cart, and then you could stream it. And it would, be choppy, but I remember being like, uh-oh, what if?
Yes, video may have killed the radio star, but streaming killed the video store. Until now. That was the voice of Julie Gilbert, the owner and operator of the Blockbuster Experience, a pop-up attraction being featured at this year's Central Florida Fair. It is literally a recreated Blockbuster store, just like you remember it. Original counters, original signs, original popcorn machine, even an original return drop box.
Welcome to Blockbuster. Come on in. How are you? Your tickets, sir? Thank you so much. We're a walk-through Blockbuster pop-up experience. We've traveled all across the United States looking for abandoned Blockbusters. These are original countertops, original signing throughout the whole entire store. We're assuming this coming attraction sign store closed in roughly about 2012 according to the movies that are on there. That's exactly how we found it, so that's exactly how we left it. We do have 15,000 DVDs, VHSs, and Blu-rays. All of our movies are $5, no matter what you find. It is a treasure hunt. You are now an official Blockbuster employee. You do get to wear your vest. Feel free, walk around, straighten up the shelves, and we'll see you at the end of your shift.
Here's Gilbert explaining the inspiration.
I was watching Captain Marvel, and she falls through a Blockbuster. And under my TV is my Burt Reynolds shrine. And there is a Burt Reynolds Blockbuster Bowl Award. So I just was like, let's build a Blockbuster. And we did. Everybody loved it. And then I wanted to go bigger, so we found an abandoned Blockbuster in Kentucky. So I reached out to him. Once we bought that, and we realized we had the entire store, what the hell were we going to do?
The answer was to take Blockbuster on the road. The store was made mobile with the idea of bringing it to conventions, corporate events, and fairs like the Central Florida Fair. And the response has been overwhelming.
When we started this, people were literally coming up and crying, and it caught me off guard. And then it hit me to not have a place where you can go walk around with your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever it is, and argue. We need that.
And it's those memories that make the Blockbuster experience so popular. Memories and movies. Julie shared her memory of her favorite movie rental, and that these memories are a shared experience.
For me, I'll tell you now, the first horror movie I saw that actually scared me was Return of the Living Dead. And if I see anything Return of the Living Dead, I'm instantly 9 years old again, like, it's my favorite, but it still scares me. Like, I love that. And even if you look over there, we got a Major League. And a guy freaked out when he saw it the other day. I guess him and his first wife went on their first date to it. So that's what it is. And that's why it's important that we have a really good selection.
And sometimes keeping the selections stocked is the hardest part.
I put Porky's. I put the 3 collection out, gone within 20 minutes. So I think I'm going to have to just have 5 copies of everything and just try to keep up. And I want to make, I want you to be able to find what you're looking for without me having to say somebody already found it.
So what is the holy grail of videos? Julie would stop at nothing to get it. And she does have a favorite piece of movie memorabilia.
Anything horror at this point is a holy grail. I found one Dawn of the Dead, and I totally knocked down a little boy. And I didn't mean to, but I saw it, and I was scared to death somebody was going to see it. And I just beelined for it, and he got in the way. And I had to be like, sorry. But I will say my Dom DeLuise Cannonball jacket was, when they reached back out, because I had bid on it and lost. And they said, hey, would you be interested in bidding on this? This is how much the seller will take. I had to think about it because, it's a little expensive. And then I was like, no, yeah, if this thing could talk, so just the idea that jacket saw what it saw.
Gen Xers talk longingly of the video store experience. Julie Gilbert thinks America has lost something with the end of the video store.
You had to walk around, you had to do the fight. You got pizza or Chinese, whatever it was. I think not having, I don't want to say the fight, not having just the tangibility. I think it's just that, or don't forget, we got to return the movies tomorrow. We got to watch them. Now it's, we'll watch them later.
The Blockbuster experience can be, experienced at the Central Florida Fair, which runs through Sunday. That's all for today's edition of Engage. We're going to be back on Tuesday afternoon at 3. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about or what you're glad you heard. Send us an email at engage@wmfe.org. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a reminder, live coverage of the State of the Union address by President Biden to Congress will begin at 9 o'clock tonight. The Republican response will follow. Coverage will be broadcast on 90.7 WMFE and 89.5 WMFV. NPR coverage will be anchored by Steve Inskeep. All Things Considered is next, following NPR News.